Hello, this is Dr. Garrett Castleberry, Associate Professor and Program Director of Communication, Media, and Ethics at Mid-America Christian University. And I am here on behalf of our COMM 5113 course, Global Marketing and Strategic Networking. This is in our graduate emphasis, partnered with the School of Business at MacU, and we are excited to create a unique special event for students in the class, part of our strategic networking experience in COMM 5113. We are welcoming in a guest who happens in this case to be quite beneficial to us, the author of The Strategic Networker, a learner's guide to effective networking. It is Dr. John Ball, or JP Hatala. And let me provide a little bit of a formal introduction to Dr. Hatala, and then allow him to give us a bit of an orientation about himself in his own words. And we'll get into a couple of prepared questions about his motivations for the Strategic Networker, this book that we're incorporating into the class, and we'll have a healthy discussion, which just to provide context for our viewing audience, the Strategic Networker is an informative text that allows us to have some guidelines that we play with as part of one of the students' special projects, that project being a foreign correspondence project plan, in which they put together a plan to develop and cultivate an international focused correspondence, and so thus practice that art and craft of networking. But a little bit about our guest today. Dr. JP Hatala is an associate professor and professional practice in the LSU School of Leadership and Human Resources Development and a senior research fellow at the University of Ottawa, Canada. His academic research focuses on social networking behaviors, social capital, which of course we've read about in this book, human resource development, career development, and transition to the labor market. And the accolades don't stop there, because Dr. Hatala is also an active voice out in the consulting world. If I'm understanding correctly, he's the founder of the social capital development firm Flow International. So perhaps there'll be opportunity to learn a little bit about this initiative, Flow International, and how it has that global impact. That's very exciting. And of course, as a faculty member, as a researcher, in addition to a practitioner, Dr. Hatala, active in the world of scholarly writing and publications, of which we were fortunate to integrate this work in Strategic Networker. Dr. Hatala, JP, welcome. Thank you for joining us. And if you don't mind, in your own words, tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey to get where you're at today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Garrett, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and your class, and great to hear you looking in. When you told me about the course about strategic networking, it was just like, wow, that's fantastic kind of approach, because at the end of the day, it really comes down to being strategic, having a plan and doing it intentionally, which is really key. But in terms of my background, I kind of half in industry, half in academia. While in industry, I had probably more questions than I had answers in terms of dealing in human resource development, employees, human capital, whatever you want to call it. And I realized I was interested in finding the answers. And within industry, you can, of course, but they're not as patient as they are in academics. So I decided to make the transition into academia and start to teach, conduct my own research, as you mentioned, and kind of explore more specifically the notion of connectivity, networking, social capital, all those types of things, because I'm an introvert. And as an introvert, one could argue that it might be a little more difficult to reach out and connect with people and so forth when it's so very important, versus extroverts who, at least on the surface, look like they're having an easy time at connecting with others. So through industry, through academia, in my career, I've been able to explore that. But I think in terms of academia, as you mentioned, I did a bit, or I do some consulting, so it gives me a bit of both worlds. It gives me an opportunity to look on the academic side. How can I add to the literature? How can I answer these potential questions? Not always getting the answer, but at least asking the questions and kind of exploring it. And then at the same time, being able to deal and work in industry and see how, the theoretical conceptual concepts apply in real world applications. So I feel I've been kind of extremely fortunate. And in fact, I was talking to somebody the other day about my career journey. And when I left industry to go into academia, huge pay cut. And it was a huge pay cut. And, spoke with my wife, and we were in Canada at the time, and we were going to make the transition down to Louisiana. And she said, well, why would you want to do that? Why would you? And I said, it's not all about money. It's about lifestyle. Academia gives you a little more of that lifestyle, with the option of kind of dabbling in industry through consulting and so forth. But I think at that point, I was thinking strategic, that if I kind of went down this path, perhaps it would open up more doors. If I stayed in industry, I wouldn't be talking to you, for example, perhaps, or I may not have written a book or done these journal articles. So I think intentionality, being strategic, is part of life. And at the end of the day, if we want to achieve what we want to achieve, it's most likely not alone. It's with the help of others. It's possible, but it's a lot more difficult. But when we invite other people in their life, or we're able to leverage, the support and the help and the advice and the knowledge of others, it makes things just a little bit easier. And I think at the end of the day, that's fairly strategic.
Oh, that's fantastic. And you mentioned previous research. You have an ongoing research agenda that naturally feeds into this main text that we incorporated into the class. There's of course a through line in essence that relates to human resources and strategic themes as in general, perhaps outside of some of the window of familiarity for some of our students, but I'm seeing a healthy overlap into the world of communication, whether it's themes relating to social media or feedback, networking, and modalities of engagement between stakeholders and shareholders, that sort of thing. But let's to kind of tie that into the direction of our conversation here. What goals did you have in mind when you set out to author, to kind of to forge this document, right? The strategic networker specifically.
Yeah, and interesting. And like I said, working within organizations, then making the transition to academia and researching and exploring how connectivity works within organizations from the organizational perspective. Conducting social network analysis, for example, seeing how the flow of information in an organization moves from one node to the next node, from one actor to the next actor, et cetera, and looking for bottlenecks, looking for disruptions, and then exploring that and explaining it and kind of talking about it with the organization to say, well, these are how, influential people in your organization control the flow of information, or these are how, management or supervisors or leaders control the flow of information. And to some degree, you want to be careful about how information flows, whether it be positive or negative, and what sort. And as we all know, in organizations, there's this informal and formal power structures, and the formal power structures are leadership, management, the boss. And often organizations believe that is how information flows. That's how they can control it, because leadership is the one who's leading the charge and spreading the word. When in fact, the informal power structures, the popular kids in the organization may have as much, if not more, influence than leadership. because people tend to gravitate towards these influential. So being able to really map that out is a kind of an interesting exercise, and seeing where there are individuals that are allowing the flow of information to flow through, and those that are blocking it and so forth, and then just figuring out and moving on from there. And also measuring the connectivity within an organization, how connected, which in SNA world, social network analysis, called density, how connected are individuals in terms of sharing and exchanging information. 100% means that everybody's talking all the time. You don't want that, because no work would ever get
Yes.
done. So you're looking for that optimal level of density or connectivity, but in essence, more so than ever before, people working together within an organization may lead to higher levels of innovation, creativity, higher levels of productivity, and so forth. And it also may not, but that organizations are realizing that there's power in teams, there's power in many, and putting people together, whether they're diverse or not, it can be a good thing as long as it's managed and so forth. That's a wholly different topic and conversation, and the complexity of that we can chat forever, and there's a lot of literature on this. But in general, if I were to simplify things, connectivity can be a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I explored that through my research and in my consulting, conducting social network analysis and figuring out the flow of information and so forth, and how connected the organization is. And if there are gaps, how do you fill those gaps? What sort of mechanisms could you put in place that encourages connectivity so that information is shared, that leads to higher levels of productivity and ultimately organizational effectiveness? And that was the kind of, I was very interested in that, and still am, of course, interested in that. But it didn't look necessarily from the individual's perspective. I was looking from more of an organizational lens perspective. And go ahead, sir.
Oh, I was going to ask, do you find that organizations, whether you're connecting with them or perhaps they're reaching out to you for assistance, do you see a immediate sense of high transparency where they're opening things up out of an interest to gain authentic feedback, or is that something you have to kind of work at as an informed agent to be able to kind of press to get access to deeper levels of kind of communication and information within the organization?
Yeah, interesting. Great question. I think obviously it depends on the organization you're dealing with, the sector of the industry. But I think generally organizations, and when I say organizations, leadership have a misconception or perception of how they place their leadership in the organization, what value that. So for example, I'll go into an organization and I'll say, they'll say, information's not flowing, people are not getting the right information, so they can't do the job, it's delaying work and so forth. And there's got to be a bottleneck of some sort. Somebody, something's slowing down the process of getting things done and so forth. And I'll ask him the question. I said, well, how will you feel if it's you or your managers who are the bottleneck? Oh, it's not us. It's absolutely not us. It can't be us. And ultimately it is them. But even before getting to that point, it's kind of saying, hey, the reality might be that you are the bottleneck, and are you willing to change? And when you approach it that way, I found they're more open to it then, but it's still difficult to change, especially from a leadership perspective.
Well, when you talk about these varying levels and degrees of of shares that we occupy within an organization, our many of our graduate students, they're working professionals, and the degree represents a means to an end. It's not necessarily a leisurely journey. It's in fact, it's quite a burden to take that on while you're mid-career or early career, kind of that working adult setting. Whether the degree itself represents the credentialing point or that opportunity to move out of a sort of a plateaued state, professionally speaking. And so I think an important part of a learning opportunity for us is to really recognize like that the lines between what we think of as educational settings and corporate settings aren't as divided as maybe culturally we perceive them to be. And so could you talk to us a little bit about how you take academic types of tools, research methods, and then theories of leadership or organizational construction and so on, and then apply those to be able to go into a workforce and use those tools to assess their effectiveness?
Yeah, very, very interesting. And early on in my career, I'd use a lot of theoretical and conceptual framework with management. And they go, what are you talking about? Like, we don't really, what does that have to do with real world? Which of course we know it has everything to do with it. That's the point of it, is describing certain phenomena and so forth. So it's the type of language that you use when bringing in concepts and theoretical frameworks from academia into industry. Is just how you deliver it, how you
Mm-hmm.
market the
Mm-hmm.
language, like in marketing 101, right? It's
Yes.
who's your audience and understanding who your audience is, and then using the language that they're comfortable in and used to using. So I think that's number one, is to make sure that you're communicating in at I don't want to say at their level, but at their openness level, I should say. And so when it comes to introducing these concepts or so on, they form the foundation of everything. I'm in human resource, development management. So when I come in with an intervention, first of all, I got to do my analysis and figure out what's going on to firstly say, this is what I see going on, and this is how potentially you can address it. How I kind of couch how they can potentially address it has to be based on some data, some experience, some understanding, some framework or something. And that's where it comes into being. And I'll give you a good example. Social learning seems to be, it's a theoretical construct. It's a theoretical understanding of how we learn socially. And in a lot of cases, especially 10, 15 years ago, organizations may have thought that, these people my employees need to learn on their own. It's not really about, getting together and having a good time. There's no benefit in that. It's about being behind a computer and in front of a instructor and taking in that information and then applying it on the job. When in fact, we know there's a lot of support for it, that people learn better together. And so taking that understanding and expressing it to the organization and saying, this is what we know, there's some evidence to support this. What sort of mechanisms, or the mechanisms I'm going to introduce, involve that, and that's why I'm involving it. On the surface, it may be counterintuitive to you, but underneath there's some evidence to support that this can be quite effective and so forth. And so by taking these concepts and this understanding of the literature and the research that's been done and the data out there, and applying it to specific mechanisms that I'm introducing to the organization and supporting it, seems to open up the opportunity for them to think outside the box, so to speak.
Absolutely. And hearing you describe that, a key term that comes to mind, it's not unique to the communication discipline, far from it, but the role of first gatekeeping, but more specifically code switching, right? For those of us that would partake in an activity like these you're describing, where you're serving in a consultant role, you have to function as a code switcher between the language that maybe meets that theoretical criteria, right? The sort of intellectual training that you gain from a certain purview, to the organizational language. And in fact, as a researcher, what that makes me think of is sometimes you are the opportunist to be able to discover kinks in their system, as you used it, bottlenecking, for one example, out of the language system that's used organizationally, right? The ways that they approach communication might be the mechanism that's creating the disturbance in the flow, right, of a workspace. Well, one of the themes, we tackle several maybe scholarly themes or attempts to get students to think outside of the box, and time has been a theme in this course, something we're exploring in terms of um, uh, recognizing its value, even its definition, its practice in intercultural settings, the way that organizations and cultures view time differently when we get outside of our immediate zones, and this book, in terms of time, it's relatively recent. But what kind of reader response has this strategic networker generated since its publication, or maybe as you went through the process of having it, let's say, reviewed and examined, for public consumption?
Yeah, great question. And I guess the intention of this was to make it as simple as possible.
Yeah.
First off, if you want to get more depth, you can look at my Google Scholar and look up some of my articles, and you can read it there. But just really give a simple overview, um, really a guide to think about. And when I look at strategic networking, it's really in two perspectives. One is the art. You kind of mentioned that earlier, the art of conversation, the art of attracting some people to you and sharing that information, and then the science about what motivates us to actually go out. And it really separates those two. As you read through the guide, it's not really giving language to what do you say in an introduction.
Sure.
There's a lot of resources out there that support, very good resources, but it's like, how do we kind of position ourselves so that we're motivated to connect? And I think and then walking through the process with all the different steps and highlighting it and so forth. I think because of that and the simplicity, the feedback has been very powerful from high school students to undergrads to graduate students to professionals going into organizations, because I think organizations today know that connectivity is important, know that working together in teams is important, sharing information is important. And so when they introduce mechanisms to support that, they don't take into account that not everybody's necessarily comfortable with reaching out to contacts beyond their first degree. Right. And they take for granted. And that's where the system kind of breaks down. For example, an organization, hey, we're having a networking event, there's going to be wine and cheese and you can talk with colleagues and so forth. I know myself as an introvert, I'm going to go to that networking event, find somebody I know and hang out with them all night.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a disadvantage to me because I'm not accessing, the people in that and that networking, the networking event to gather information to help support maybe what I want to do, or vice versa, me support somebody else, what they're trying to do and so forth. So I think when people start to understand that there's these subconscious motivational drivers that we put into gear or put into place, it's going to encourage us to reach out more and perhaps make us feel more comfortable with networking. So generally, people are sometimes saying, well, I thought it was going to be more about scripts and what to say, but it's more of a process and what I can do to kind of set myself up for success. Generally, that's the type of feedback, and it's been fairly positive, if I do say so myself.
One takeaway is, as we were working through the text and discussing it kind of asynchronously in our summertime class setting here, is a takeaway that I had was I drew value from the insight that you designate strong ties versus weak ties in terms of our connections, and we recognize that the strong ties are these inner circles that we have, the weak ties representing these fringe individuals and maybe the unknown that we can connect with, but for something to exist as a weak tie is not a bad thing. It's not a negative for us, and in fact it can be a positive, because I think a fear that might creep into inexperienced communicators and professional network workers is that if I'm not already at the level of close tie, I can't connect with this person, or I don't feel open enough to reaching out and locating this point of contact that can further, my agenda or create a mutual benefit between parties. And just conceptualizing this, giving a name and identity to this idea that it's okay to have these tertiary individuals in our circles, and in fact that can have its own strategic advantages. It was a beneficial use of word terminology there. Well, something else I wanted to maybe pick your brain a little bit about, just talk about the concept is as a network map or networked map. I'm trying to locate the exact wording that you use on within the book, but one of the projects that we develop that we task for our students is to create their own network map as part of their own project planning along the way. Could you talk a little bit about maybe inspiration from that, when or if you've used it before, and kind of the strengths that it presents for people that just need stronger organization?
Hmm. Yeah, and I think it was kind of good segue that you took with weak ties versus strong ties, because that's of course part of a network map, right? Is kind of mapping out your connections and who you have and what the degrees of separation are and so forth. But it also goes back to your earlier question about kind of transferring this academic academic knowledge into the real world setting, whether it be an organization or something else. And Mark Granovetter, who came up with weak tie theory, is the notion, well, he believed that the best way to get job related information or information about promotion is through strong ties. And strong ties are the ones that we have a high level of frequency of contact, like our close family, our friends, and so forth. And weak ties were, like you read, acquaintances. And to his surprise, it was weak ties that were much better at providing that information. And two main reasons, amongst the others, but two main reasons was, one, our strong ties make assumptions about us. So Garrett, you're not interested in that. I'm not even going to pass that information on to you. Right. So we make assumptions. Weak ties don't. I don't know you well enough to say you'll like it or you don't. So I just pass it on anyways. And the redundancy of information that comes into the network is much higher when you just have a strong tie network, right? Because it's the same people, everybody knows everybody knows the same information. But in your weak ties, new information has an opportunity to kind of enter the network, which opens you up to opportunity, to new information. And in Granovetter's case, or the strength of weak tie theory, to promotion, job promotion opportunities, or job related information. With the maps, it allows you to kind of map out who's your weak ties and who's your strong ties. So if you started at your first degree of separation, meaning you know somebody really well, and you need to, let's say you're trying to figure out how to learn a language, and you're looking at your first time and you stop there, that's going to be problematic for you, because beyond that first degree, there's second degree, because they know somebody and those people know somebody and so forth. So it broadens your network entirely. And when you start to map that out, it really opens you up to seeing what possibilities and who you're actually connected to, maybe not directly, but indirectly, that can help you, accomplish whatever you want to accomplish. So a map really kind of brings that to the surface. So for example, I may put, Garrett is a first degree contact. Who in the heck does Garrett know? Well, I know he wrote a paper with so-and-so, he taught a course with so-and-so. Well, what do they know? And then who do they know? And then you can see how it kind of branches out. So you may think, and we use this for newcomers, right? You come to a new country, a new city, whatever, and you don't know anybody, but 1, 2, 3, and the post person, right? And the post person, but the post person knows somebody. And the somebody they know. So when you map it out, it gives you a visual representation. And where that comes from is just social network analysis. We map out the flow of information and the people in an organization. So from a personal level, it's a good exercise to really go through and think about, who's in your network, who are my strong ties, and who are my weak ties.
What's so potent about this idea for me is that by walking ourselves through the labor of that as an activity, we're to visualize it, gives it new dimensionality. It can unlock how we perceive the people we know, the contacts we have, and so on. And perhaps, to link that to digital culture right now, maybe that's part of that ongoing allure of social media. Is it visualized something we did. It maybe accentuated it in performative ways that aren't always authentic, but it nonetheless it visualized this value that we have in culture, in society. And it's kind of, it continues to kind of morph and evolve in both healthy and maybe monstrous ways. But have you, the process of putting together a work like this, which in some ways it's kind of a manuscript, often represents a culmination of several previous ideas that we've worked on and worked through in different capacities. They could be teaching capacities, they could be practical, practicum based capacities, like consulting, like working with organizations. But the process of putting it all together sometimes can give us a sense of revelation in a new way, just unlock yet another layer of the way we view that. Has your perspective or insights into strategic networking altered, through the process of writing this? Were there any new aha moments to kind of come to as a result?
Yeah, and definitely there was. And I think with any academic or any curious individual, it always evolves, right? And something, why did I think of that? Well, it's too late. I already wrote the manuscript. I have to do a second edition or a third
That's
edition.
right.
Exactly. So, but where this really started was as an assistant professor. It's publish or perish, that whole notion. You got to write, and if you want to publish, the easiest way to publish is to collaborate, right? Either with a senior scholar or junior scholar, whoever's motivated and willing to work with you. And so I said, hey, that's pretty strategic. I got to write X number of papers by the time I reach tenure. How can I reach out to people? So I'd randomly reach out to somebody and say, hey, my name's JP Hatala. I'm in the process of conducting this paper or writing this paper on this topic. Are you interested? And it was terrible results. Nobody would collaborate. Not, I don't think because I was a nasty guy or something. I think the reason was they weren't clear on how they could help.
Yeah.
They weren't clear on what effort they had to put towards it. And I believe at the end of the day, me included in leading the way, we're lazy by nature, right? We're lazy by nature, and we're trying to take the easy route. Now, not everybody, but I can speak for myself. But when somebody makes it easy for me, for example, a student comes to me and says, I'm having this problem, and this is what I think it might be. It makes it easier for me. They're giving me more information. I can help diagnose and so forth. If I have a student that says, I have a problem, I need your help me. It becomes more, subconsciously or whatever, I kind of, you're making me work. Like, why are you making me delve into this? You should set this up so that I can just take the ball and run with it and say, okay, this could be it, this could be it, this could be it. I was doing that same thing with reaching out to collaborators. I wasn't being very specific on how I saw them helping me, right? Very specific. I think you can read this chapter or this section or whatever. And secondly, I wasn't very probably good in showing that I would demonstrate some form of reciprocity or give them the comfort or the trust that I would give back if they're willing to help with me. So that's how it all started. And I said, well, I got to be more concise, more strategic when I reach out. And that's where, the book comes in play, the knowledge, the COW methods, the KAU,
Yes.
Knowledge of self, knowledge of network, knowledge of goals, like being very explicit and not only be clear in what you're trying to accomplish, but being able to articulate it in a way that people can take it in and digest it and make comment on it. And so that was the impediment or the thing that started me writing this book. What I've learned is, and digging deeper into the literature, is and I've always had the question, a colleague of mine, we always have, what motivates somebody to reach out to connect with somebody else? And goals do, right? If I'm clear on what I want to accomplish, like that's why I have network goals in there, thinking about a goal, because it gives me purpose. If you tell me, hey, there's a networking event, with scholars in this particular area, and I happen to have a goal that links to somebody at this network event that could potentially help me, I may be more motivated to go there because I have purpose, and purpose is really important. And goals give us purpose. In the literature, there's performance goals and there's learning goals. And performance goals is all about, achieving a level of performance, which in essence impacts the ego, right? So if I set a performance from personal, I want to lose 50 pounds, in the next month, to, I want to read X number of books. When we quantify things, it impacts the ego, because if we don't accomplish it, we may think we may look bad. And then on learning goals side, it's all about mastery. Mastery is all about failing. So like kind of falling down, getting back up, and accomplishing it. When you look at it from a networking perspective, if all you set are performance goals, and we see this in organizations as well, what's the motivation to reach out to somebody for support and help? And we go into sales organizations all the time, and the types of goals they set for their salespeople, performance-based. And if for some reason the individual salesperson does not believe that they can accomplish the goal, there's no way they're going to reach out for help, because it's going to impact their ego. Yeah. So when they put a mixture between mastery or learning goals and performance goals, we're finding that when people set those learning goals, they're more likely to reach out to get to support and help that they need. It opens up them to new information and so forth. And when they do that, there's potentially a higher level of success. When it comes to networking, we know we got to do it. Those that do it well succeed, however success is defined to them. So if you get people motivated to reach out because they're setting the right type of goals, I think they're more likely to do that. And that's something I'd like to add in the next edition of this. I didn't really go into a lot of details beyond the network goals about, thinking about a goal that you have and linking to somebody in your network who you think you can help. But looking at the types of goals that you set and how that may help you and motivate you, especially if you're an introvert, to reach out to the people that could potentially help.
You used an excellent keyword a couple of minutes ago, reciprocity. And it got me thinking about its relationship to our concern or our anxieties, like, or as you put it, maybe the ego-mindedness that's either stopping us or halting our progress in networking spaces for the individual. And I'm sure we would have a couple in the class and any sample size we drew from, for the individual that believes, I recognize the act of reciprocity is important and you'll want to enter an exchange with mutual benefit in mind, but I am or perceive myself as inadequate. What is a way in which we can maybe better train ourselves to create personal inventory, right? To locate ways to exchange value and not just always be asking from others.
Yeah, and again, going back to the cow and the K, it's knowing yourself. What do you bring to the table, right? And you might not think you have any skill or ability, which I doubt you don't, but you know people, right? And that's, you have social capital. You have access to these social resources that could potentially help somebody else just by referring somebody to someone that needs help or support and so forth. Is a way of reciprocity, right? Giving back. And often I don't think individuals take into account that the people they know is of value, right? And not even the first degrees, it could be the second degrees, the third degrees, and so forth. So, you have these individuals that are considered connectors. They're very valuable. They go to a party and somebody will say, oh, I need a shed built. I know a guy that built a shed. You got to get in touch with him. Value right off the top. And all he did was know somebody. But I think you mentioned, like, it's taking an inventory of who you are, what you bring to the table. Because at the end of the day, to be strategic, to be a strategic network, it's all about developing mutually beneficial relationships, right? Just in our case, you reached out and you said, hey, do you mind coming and talking about your book? Absolutely, it was a good cause and all of that. Perhaps, if I come out to you sometime in the future and ask you to do something that's not way off of what you're able to do, I think you would probably want to, contribute or help out. If you decided not to, what happens to our relationship, right? Or if you couldn't do it, you made sure, you say, hey, JP, I really want to help you. I don't have time, or I don't have the ability, but let me think about, somebody that might be able to help you, and I'll get back to you. And you get back to them even if you don't find it. It's just following up and so forth. But I think it's just, individuals need to take stock of who they are, what they bring to the table, whether it's educational, background, or experience in the workforce, or volunteering, or hobbies, or who they know, like who's in their network and who their network can be connected to. And I think that's how they not trick the mind, but support their progress more, in that it's okay. It's okay to reach out to people for support. And I will say this, I'll just add to this. What happens is, you talked about weak ties, strong ties. Strong ties, you have a strong relationship. And I think students break down here. They go out and make high risk requests. Can you give me a job, to weak ties? And that's a pretty high level request to ask of someone you don't really know. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. So if you want to start to develop a relationship, if you want to start to develop trust, the type of request you make to your network has to match the relationship you have. So for example, if I wanted $20 from you, Garrett, we're just kind of chatting for the first time. I don't think you're going to give me $20. So I'm not going to ask you for $20. I may go to, an uncle or a good friend, say, give me $20. I'll tell your wife what you did last night. But I'm going to go to Garrett and say, hey, the type of request, I need to make some more money because I need this money. Do you have any suggestions in academia where there may be some opportunities where they're hiring adjunct professors? Not even asking you for a job. So it's just making sure, and I did this along this way, making a request to an individual I don't have a relationship. Mm-hmm. You need to match the relationship with the request that you're making, and you'll find a greater return. And I think when we mismatch those, that's when we get demotivated and stop going to the network, because we claim, wow, this doesn't work.
You use a great phrase, know yourself. And that's a familiar phrase that we even have in some of our leadership training here at MACU, that some of the students, that if they're employees at the university, have likely encountered at some point. But to know yourself, if I'm translating it and even using the information you're sharing right now, it's to activate intentionality, to learn how to be more intentional. And that's not a betrayal to self, it's a calling up of self, right? It's reaching that maturation of self challenge in a healthy way, without always thinking about how can I exploit that relationship, that networked individual. Rather it's that, a mature approach of this is a communal exchange, whether they're a strong tie or a weak tie. Well, if there's one, I mean, there's no if to this. Among the takeaways in this book, what is a thought that you value readers leaving with as they conclude the text, as they put it down, and sort of what's one of the important takeaways that come to mind for new readers?
Yeah, great question. And I think probably the biggest one is have purpose. And when it comes to networking, have purpose. Mm-hmm. And how we have purpose is by being clear on what we want to accomplish. and that's by setting goals. I'm sure if you surveyed a class and you asked, everybody to stand up and share their goals, not many would. Not many would, right? Perhaps at times me included, even though I know that goals give us purpose. And have purpose by setting goals, because when you have goals and you're clear and you're able to articulate them, I talk about the SMART method, which is a common, methodology for setting goals. If you're clear on what you want to accomplish, when you go into a networking room, you're going to start to think about how I can accomplish my goals through the potential help of these individuals I'm going into. And it really gives you purpose. And so I think that's the number one takeaway. Just be clear. And I know when somebody asks you, well, what are you trying to accomplish? Don't go, oh my God, I got to sit down and set these goals. What a boring activity and so forth. It is fundamental to strategic networking is that you be one, clear on what you're trying to accomplish, and two, being able to articulate that in an easy way.
I would ask in what way you view the strategic networker functioning, not just at a dialogic level of whether it's organizational discussions or as we've demonstrated, classroom discussions, but on a global scale. But I feel like you've encompassed this, right, contextually within the course of sharing so much with us on this topic as relating to your book, the strategic networker, a learner's guide to effective networking. One of the great sells. I just want to pause. I'm going to put a compliment exclamation point on this, because academia could benefit from enhanced brevity, and this is such a reader friendly. You used the word manual earlier. I'm just echoing that term that I heard, that phrasing that you used, and it operates on multiple levels, which is such a positive skill. But I love that its brevity allows it to be inserted into different contexts, like an accelerated course, such as the one we're running, and thus really lowers the anxiety and increases the likelihood that our students are truly going to work all the way through it and kind of grapple with those ideas. And so if anything, we can look forward to maybe the longer version if there's a future edition. So hopefully that will be the case, and you'll be able to incorporate those aha moments. Dr. Tall, I appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule, to join us to talk about your book, but also yourself, some of your experiences. I feel like there's, as you said, there's a number of side alleys and subterranean villas that we could go spelunking into and exploring a bevy of topics. But for purposes of focus, we'll curtail that conversation for a later date. It was gracious of you to join us to talk and share. Appreciate having you having you with us.
Well, it's a pleasure meeting you, Garrett, and I enjoyed the conversation, and I thank you for the opportunity to kind of share what my experiences have been.
Absolutely. And for our students, just a final word of application here. I think what we succeeded in through this exercise, through this guest lecture interview with JP Hatala and talking about his work, was we were demonstrating what we're seeking to do in the class. We're wanting you all to be active and bold and intentional, and to use some of those words we've talked about this hour, in how you approach future contacts in your strategic networks. Not simply for purposes of completing the assignment to quote unquote get the grade with regards to our foreign correspondence project, but also in your own professional journeys, of which you're on one right now. So thanks again to our guest author for sharing and talking with us this hour. Hope you were enriched as much as I was, and we'll look forward to future opportunities to engage with others in our COMM 5113 course, Global Marketing and Strategic Networking.